Hello, everyone. I am not your typical co host of Jimmie Martin. I am Jon Hunt. Jimmy unfortunately could not make it tonight due to an unforeseen emergency. So I will be hosting this edition of the Bluegrass Soccer Cast. But we got a special guest with us, someone that some of y'all might be familiar with, Justin Blair of Cincinnati Soccer Talk.
Yeah,
Justin, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I've been a long time listener and I've really enjoyed your all's content. So thanks for having me on.
No problem, Justin. Thank you for joining us. So for those that are more used to the USL talk, tonight we're gonna kind of lean more into the happenings with MLS and stuff because they have some effects on the USL. But before we do that, Justin, why don't you give the listeners a little background on you and how you got to covering soccer?
Yeah, so my story is a little bit funny. My dad was a longtime writer covering various different outlets, covering the University of Kentucky. Uh, One day he said, hey, you want to come down with me? We're going to a game. It's like 2008. And I started covering sports and, print and photography. When I moved up to Cincinnati, they brought in a soccer team. I, found a group that I really liked, and I've been writing with them for now 3 years. It's been a blast.
Oh, nice. So how did you go to covering Cincinnati?
I just wanted a new challenge. Is to be frank, it was nice to have something a little bit more locally than University of Kentucky down in Lexington, or even some of the publications I wrote for cover Kentucky's bitter rival, University of Florida. So those are far flung places. You don't really get to, maybe hang out with some of your co-writers and stuff like that. So I was like, man, this seems like a really good group, and I love FC Cincinnati. I latched on to him from moment go, and it's been brilliant. It's been his meteoric climb for FC Cincinnati through the MLS ranks.
Very, very historic indeed. My hope is Cincinnati doesn't flame out like some teams do and go into that like weird state of mediocrity. They're not really good and they're not really bad, but they're like kind of good. That ha- tends to happen for a while for some teams. But one of the reasons that some people allude to, there's other aspects to it that Cincinnati is in the MLS is from some people's arguments of the Open Cup. So, Justin, why don't you kind of refresh the listeners on the whole MLS side and approach the Open Cup this year?
Yeah, so I believe it was in December, maybe early January, we started getting rumblings that the MLS was maybe not happy. Don Garber has never been shy about talking about, his disappointment with the way the U.S. Open Cup has been covered, maybe some of the compensation that goes along with that. And then we kind of out of the blue on a random morning, we woke up and MLS said, "Well, we're pulling out all of our first team," and of course that sent a shock through the waves. Right, part of the U.S. Open Cup, the allure of it is that you get a chance to be an amateur team, like me and you, John, could go out there and start a team, and we wouldn't make it that far, but if we could, we would be able to compete against the very best of the best, right? The teams in the MLS are considered the best at this. They have the Division One title from U.S. Soccer, and so it was a shock, and people had to adjust. And then shortly thereafter, we got a pushback from the U.S. Soccer Federation that said, "No, thanks, but no thanks. We're perfectly content with MLS clubs being in it." And I think the proposition was for the two teams only to compete in the tournament, and they weren't having it. So good on them for pushing back on MLS. Uh, but then, of course, the MLS still was working at it and working at it. I think there was the chairman got fired, got told to step down, I should say, and And MLS ultimately got their way in a way. I mean, there's only 8 teams now competing from the first teams. None of those teams are teams that are competing in the current CONCACAF Champions Cup. And then a handful of 2 teams are going to be participating in it. So I don't think anybody got what they truly wanted out of this situation, but I think the person that lost the most was the fans.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. For the fans listening, a little refresher. So there are MLS teams in the tournament, as Justin said. They are the 7 non-CONCACAF Champions Cup teams by last year's Shield standings, plus Houston as defending champs, and then the remaining 9, I believe, by Shield standings, they threw in their MLS Next teams, which is really weird. And especially, but good news is it came out recently that the MLS teams can't like try to just swap teams for that. There's a lot of loan rules out and certain minutes played that a player has to can't exceed if he's on the first team and getting loaned down to the next pro team. So there's no worry of like I don't know any people getting dropped down to just get their team further into the tournament.
Yeah, what was bizarre about that decision by the MLS is in the MLS they have a first team roster. You can't move players back and forth. But when you went into the Open Cup, you could essentially do that. You could say, okay, well, we're going to bring up some of our younger players, some of our academy players, some of our 2-team players, just to keep a fresh roster because it's kind of a daunting task for not only MLS teams but even USL teams. They have to compete with the fact that they're playing games on the weekend plus the U.S. Open Cup games on the weekdays. We saw LAFC last year kind of comically decided they're just going to play very young players. They're almost their entire academy roster for the first stages through the tournament, and it almost backfired on them. But for MLS, they essentially could have just said nothing and just between themselves made that decision for themselves. Hey, we're not going to play our first team players. Now, maybe there would have been blowback, but that would have been perfectly within the rules. Now the rules have been changed to where they can't do that. So it kind of bit them in the butt, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I think it did as well. To your point, a lot of people bring up the argument that in previous years when MLS was fully playing, that teams already did kind of play their MLS Next Pro teams. So what is the difference, or what is your thoughts on the difference versus FC Cincinnati playing and FC Cincinnati 2 playing, even though it's basically the 2's roster on the field for FC Cincinnati?
Well, for me, if I was to look at this as, let's go back in time, right? When for those that don't know, FC Cincinnati was in the USL before they joined the MLS. So for me, I wouldn't care who they put out on the field. When we played Chicago in Nippert Stadium, I wouldn't have cared if Shadursky was there or if it was Jim Joe, right? It's about going head to head in a competitive match against one of the top dogs and taking it to them. So that would be on the MLS for not showing up and playing their best team, right? So for me, it's about the historical value of beating one of those clubs, particularly for a team in the USL or even lower divisions that would be looking for more investment, right? More interest, more buy-in. FC Cincinnati benefited a lot from that, playing in the U.S. Open Cup and having those big MLS clubs coming into town.
Yeah, and I know listeners were kind of beating a dead horse because it's kind of been all that's really talked about across multiple different platforms as we're going near it. How much do you think that this has to do with the MLS's marketing arm of some no longer having control over the tournament, and MLS essentially not getting like that cut of whatever they got from some running the marketing of the tournament?
Well, it kind of, the gun points both ways, doesn't it, John? Because MLS backed out, now it's kind of left those, we'll say, hotheads over at the USL front office, kind of left holding the gun. They're like, well, what do we do now? Because we just basically kicked out our most influential partner. So it was a mutual decision for MLS to get out of there, but obviously without being able to kind of dictate scheduling, dictate marketing, how we broadcast the tournament, I think MLS said, hey, may not be as fruitful anymore for us, and there's better options. And we saw the emergence of Leagues Cup. I don't think there's exact parallels there, but I do think that the Leagues Cup has made some decisions for the MLS on saying, hey, we value this tournament, we value this prize pool a little bit more than trying to pull up some of the broadcast rights and try to really negotiate with some big players in the sports media.
So, and to end it, what has been like FC Cincinnati's stance on this whole thing? Because I know the club officially released a statement on it recently, didn't they not?
They did, yes. They are pretty disappointed with the decision of the MLS. Of course, as previously mentioned, the U.S. Open Cup means a lot to FC Cincinnati. A lot of people attribute it to why FC Cincinnati was able to make that climb from USL to MLS. But for FC Cincinnati, I think that club always will hold a little bit of a piece of our hearts as fans and for the ownership group, right? These are guys that aren't soccer guys. This was their big opportunity, and that's their trophy on the wall. Like, hey, look what we did in 2017 in the Open Cup, making it to the semifinals. So I think that for a lot of people in the front office, I think a lot of players missed that opportunity to be able to compete with first-team players for some starting minutes in the MLS play. So I think it hurts a lot of people in the organization, and MLS really said, we're going to make this decision for all clubs, and you're going to have to live with it. And FC Cincinnati and some other clubs like St. Louis City, they're pushing back on the MLS saying, hey, we're going to stand with you, but obviously we don't like this. And in the future, you need to let clubs make their decision for themselves.
And do you think that will be the solution going forward, that the MLS ultimately gives the clubs each an option to opt in or not for the Cup?
I think it does. Because there are clubs in the MLS, just like in any professional sports league, that are in transition years or, don't really, even though it's an expanded playoffs, don't really feel like they're going to be competing in that, right? So for a lot of clubs, having another cup opportunity is great, especially when you're competing with a less, we'll just say, less hostile of a field. If other bigger clubs that are competing in Champions Cup or whatever don't want to pursue the U.S. Open Cup. So I think it may solve the problem. I think there still will be teams that opt out. It's just really hard to market in some areas. We know Houston has a hard time filling their stadium. I know they won it last year, but they have a really hard time marketing a weekend game. So having a weekday game against Tacoma is not going to bring a lot of fans to the stadium. So I think that it would help us as fans that want to be in this tournament, but I don't think it's going to put all 29 teams back into the bottle.
Yeah, I don't see the MLS, at least right now, going full back into it. There's a part of me that, and this is kind of my whole approach to the MLS right now, there's a part of me that's like they're putting all their eggs in a Messi basket. They don't say they're doing this, but they clearly are. And I'm just waiting for the rug to be pulled out under them when they realize a bunch of people are only following the league because of Messi, and that's it. They're not gonna stay. You might get some fringe guys on the edge that might stay, but once Messi's gone, it's like what happened with La Liga once Ronaldo and Messi were gone. It's kind of nosedive in popularity. That's what my fear is with the MLS right now, with all their eggs in this Messi basket, even though Don Garber says they're not all in the basket.
Well, John, me and you were pretty young guys at one point, and I don't know if you've gone to a local, kids soccer pitch lately, but the amount of kids that are trying to emulate Messi, that talk Messi, that go on about Messi, I think that was what the ultimate target was, right? Obviously, go get the money right now, right? A lot of people are going to be paying attention to it. A lot of fans are going to be, captivated by the world's greatest player coming to MLS. But I think for the most part, it's trying to secure the next generation of fans, right? It's getting interest. Like if you want to watch Messi, you got to watch this. Hey, your local team is also playing here, or a team nearby, right? So it's getting that interest and that conversation going to where the MLS is competing with MLB and NBA for, players. I mean, think of how many kids run around with Steph Curry jerseys, right? They may go to their local Pacers game just to watch Steph Curry. So it's kind of that effect. I think it's going to end up being in the long run a success, especially since Messi gets part ownership of a new club, gets that kind of David Beckham kicking. So I think in the long term, it's going to be great. But yeah, I think we're in the next 2-3 years, we're going to see a nosedive, particularly on that Apple TV subscriptions.
Yeah, the David Beckham, a lot of people look at that as like a 50-50. It helped stabilize the league a lot. They grew a lot when he was there and that type of thing. And I think we're seeing the same thing with Messi. They're kind of growing more as a global brand. My big thing with them is that they're trying to be too American, in my opinion, where yes, it's an American league, but there's these other leagues that everyone also watches that like we can't just go like the NFL has honestly no competitor. Like Canadian Football League is fun to watch. It's not going to touch the NFL. Completely different rules and all that type of stuff. The best players from Europe in basketball are coming here. Same with hockey. They're coming to the U.S. The MLS has yet to have a player come to the MLS in their prime. Right. So that's where I'm a little shaky on their
we got
let's go the American route.
We got a long haul until one of the big names of today comes over there. You know what I mean? Like we're a far cry from Sadio Mane or Erling Haaland or Mbappe coming to MLS, but it is getting there, right? I mean, we're slowly crawling there. I think the biggest problem with MLS soccer, at least, I don't know the USL roster structure rules very well, but we saw it last night. There was a couple MLS teams took on Liga MX teams, got absolutely pancaked because there is just no depth in MLS clubs. They can't, with the current salary cap rules, you can't compete. You can't compete with teams over there. So it's a gradual progression. We don't want what happened in the 70s to happen again in the 80s. We don't want a collapse of the MLS. I think that would be bad for all parties involved, including the USL. But I think we're going to get there. And to your point, I think that a lot of the gimmicky things, the playoffs, having the all-star game, it is a bit, tongue in cheek, right? They keep the funny thing about MLS playoffs too is they just keep changing the rules. Like you don't even know when the season kicks off what the MLS playoff rules are.
Yeah, I personally liked when they modeled it after like the European knockout format, where it was like aggregate score up until the final. It was like, okay, good. That's you have American playoffs, which I'm hit or miss on in soccer. I think it's interesting and that type of stuff. It's not like it doesn't grind my gears, but like a best of 3,
yeah,
it doesn't make sense to me.
particularly with the rules that they have in play.
Yeah,
Like you literally, like you're playing a New York Red Bulls, right? Perfectly fine sitting in the box all match. They can technically win on 2 penalty shootouts, right? Now,
yeah,
obviously, you could say you should have scored on the night, but I mean, they could literally sit 10 inside of the box the entire night and then win on penalty shootout. So I think it's a ridiculous way to settle um, a playoff run. Especially, my biggest complaint is you have 18 teams now currently in a 29 team league making the playoffs. That's absurd. Like that, I agree with you. I think it should go to aggregate, but I think that would be just for the first round. I think they keep that kind of the same, right? Just keep, an aggregate for the first round, and then once we get on, let's just get on with it, right? Kind of like the World Cup, which I think most casual uh, soccer fans per se are familiar with that kind of tournament.
yeah. And then, like, getting into our last little bit of the MLS, the lockout of the refs has been going on for a while now. We're getting almost. This is match day 4 coming up for teams. So we're getting about a month into this lockout being full on and official. Has there anything been any movement updates on the referee situation?
No, not since February 17th. Now, I think Don Garber, when the season kicked off during week 1, I think he had some comments in a LA Miami match. He was doing some kind of op-ed press conference, and it since we extended that last offer, the MLS to Pro agreed with it, but the PSRA did not agree with it. They did not like the terms. I think the big hardliner was the ARs and their compensation. I think you're still looking at probably like 60,000 a year for. I mean, a lot of people could say, hey, I would love to be an AR. It would be awesome to travel the country and rep soccer matches. 60,000 is no big deal. You get your hotel, you get all that. It's like, yeah, but how do you raise a family? And that kind of, you're not making very much. So there's not much money to send back home, and you're constantly out on the road just as much as these players. We go on and on about how the United States has all these travel, uh, struggles, right? You're taking a physical toll being an AR running the line. So it still hasn't been resolved. I would love to see it be resolved. I would love for MLS to increase the compensation, not for the current referees. Okay. I think the match officials that we have seen in 2022, 2023 have been awful. I think there are some good apples in that bunch, but the most part, they're terrible. They're not FIFA quality referees. So I would like to see us increase the competition or increase the compensation to increase the competition. I would like to see teams or referees or even young guys that want to, hey, I think I can pursue this path. I really am passionate about this. It's a viable option now for them instead of saying, hey, take what you get or leave it. We're not going to give you any more of this, sweet pie, sweet messy pie that we got going on over here.
Yeah, and for those that might not know what Justin's alluding to, the head refs make decent amount. It's not great, but it's livable wage. The assistant referees, the guys who wave the flags, they sometimes can make as low as I've seen like 20,000 a year. Obviously, that's not livable, and depending, especially where some might live, that's definitely not a livable wage. And so that's kind of what the PSRA is arguing for, is for this like the lower end guys on the totem pole to get more of a fair cut type thing. I think I saw somewhere it's like 100K per team is what they're arguing for,
Yeah.
which is like one game ticket sales possibly.
Yeah, for some teams, for sure. I think for FC Cincinnati, they, tenfold some of that. 30, you think to yourself at very get in price, you're talking about $35 a ticket, 25,000 fans. I mean, it covers it. Now you obviously have to cover operations and the like, but yeah, salaries. I think that's a pretty big ask from the MLS right off the bat. I think it's like 10% of what a normal match day would be on operating costs, and that's just too high at this time for assistant and match officials.
That's fair. Um, let's kind of hop off MLS a little bit. Justin, for those that don't know, you are a somewhat of a Lexington fan.
Somewhat,
Uh,
when scheduling allows. It's unfortunate the time slots, right? You get those Saturdays at 7 and 7:30. So you get like the first 30 minutes if it's a FC Cincinnati road match. I get 30 minutes of Lexington SC and then it's on. So it's a lot of catching up on highlights.
speaking on that, did you get a chance to watch or take in the home opener this past weekend?
I caught bits and pieces, yeah. I thought that Lexington I felt like from what I saw of the match, I felt like they controlled possession well. But the problem with them is currently you're still trying to work in, Lassiter. Is that correct? Yeah,
Lancaster.
trying to Lancaster. Sorry, Lancaster. You're still trying to work him in a little bit and try because he's obviously going to be one of the keys to Lexington's team. But Lancaster kind of was making a little bit more of those runs that may have been, I wouldn't say hero ball kind of stuff, but to me, it felt like it was a little bit disconnected just from the short viewing. I think I caught maybe 20, 25 minutes of that match. What did you see, John?
I saw personally a lot. I've watched it. I think I've watched it 2 times now, and I watched it in person. But from what I saw of it, Lexington looks way upgraded from last year. Control the ball so much better. To me, the biggest issue I've seen is chemistry related. This roster has only been together for 5 weeks, and it's just a matter of that was their first competitive match together. When you had 6 new guys in the starting 11 and then 8 total that debuted in this game. So, it's just a chemistry thing to me. And I think Northern Colorado was missing 2 big attackers. So I think it was that Colorado kind of went into a low, we're not going to lose this game. We won't want type of mentality. And Lexington was a little caught off guard by it. And I think that's where, you're still doing the chemistry pairings of Diouf and Lancaster up top, in the midfield, them all figuring it out, and it was just they're still trying to figure stuff out, still trying to figure out what the guy's speed, where they can make a run, that sort of thing. That was my big takeaways from the match. Well,
how was it getting back into the stands? What was that like?
Cold. It was nice to be back, but it was cold. It was all very cold. It was 40 degrees and windy. And we had rain this whole past week, so it was not there wasn't any heat in the air of any kind. It was cold. It should be nicer this Friday though.
It's always interesting because this is Lexington's first off season with those memories of the previous season in your head, right? So it's pretty cool that build up to that first match day and the anticipation of, hey, I'm going to go here, or, hey, I'm going to do this and stuff like that. Do you think they've kind of cultivated that at Georgetown, or is it still kind of in its infancy?
They've worked into it. There's a lot of movement by the CEO and people of fully preparing for the stadium to open in August. So there's a lot of let's just go through the motions as best we can. They're kind of keeping the same status quo type deal. They didn't deck out Georgetown as much as they did last year in terms of a conversion. I don't know if that's just because we've started a month earlier than we did last year, and Georgetown still kind of might need certain things. But it's I I don't I would like for them to kind of take Toyota more seriously at this point, but I also understand the movement of like we want to be fully prepared come August when we get into our new stadium and all that type stuff. And they have the Super League kicking off soon. I don't know if you saw that they announced
Yeah.
the branding. The branding is going to be all the same across every single team, which I personally like. I've ran into a small handful that I think it should be separate, but personally, I'm all for the same branding across all teams.
I'm cool with the
Um,
same branding, but just as a personal preference, I I think I've been following Radoya's Monterey quite a bit lately, obviously, but to have the women's and the men's content mixed together, it kind of just makes it a little bit confusing, right? I wish they would kind of
yeah,
branch
two.
out into two different accounts.
What I'm hearing is there's going to be a movement, or there's talks about a movement to having a dedicated women's account. It's
Awesome.
just a matter of content and putting content out there where it's like so sparingly. Like this is our first Super League announcement. If you take out the combines they've been doing of just like, hey, we're doing this thing in California or Colorado, come out. This is like the first Super League announcement since they hired the coach in early January. So like, yeah, we can make an account, but it's gonna have 2 months in between posts. It's kind of pointless.
Yeah, yeah. So
Uh,
it may be good to get like legs behind you, have a little bit more content build up, and then release it kind of as the season starts, so you get some of those match day tweets in there and all that stuff. I could
yeah,
see your point
that's
on that.
that's what I'm hearing is kind of like why they haven't doing. They might move into it with the W League coming up. They might lean into that a little bit, but that's what I've been hearing from places, people throughout the club, and that type of thing.
Well, I'm
Um,
ready for it. It's not far away from my in-laws' house. So I mean, like I think they're over in Andover Hills. So it's just like I could just go out the back end of that neighborhood and just roll right up the way. It's I can't like it when August comes around and they're in that new stadium. I can go to that game every single day. Actually, fun fact, I think I'm gonna actually be going down uh this Friday to the game. We're
oh, you will,
still seeing how plans go and stuff like that. So it'll be fun. It'll be my first time going down to Georgetown.
oh, it will be fun. Remind me to send you something later off camera. I can get you a ticket deal type
I
of
appreciate that.
situation. Um, anyways, back where were we? Sorry about that.
That's how these
Um,
shows go, isn't it?
well, it's how these shows go. It's I don't we're trying to cover everything, but Jimmy's
Yeah,
more like Louisville area, and we're
yeah,
both Lexington people, so I don't want like to kill Louisville people in
yeah.
particular because both of their seasons are kicking off this weekend.
We love you, Bowling Green. We love you guys down there. We love you guys out in Elizabeth, E Town, all that stuff. I actually
Yeah.
played soccer down at Western Kentucky, so I know what it's like. I was a freshman in 2009, and I played on their club team down there because they had just gone from D1 scholarship players, so all those players cleared out for the most part, and then they were just playing club level. Other than a few people, seniors that were just getting their degree and calling it quits. So it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. I unfortunately didn't take school as seriously as I probably should have in the first go around. So it was a short lived career in collegiate club level soccer. So that's just a
Yeah,
little fun tidbit.
you were there right when kind of like Western dropped soccer, men's
It was
soccer.
the very first fall semester after they dropped it. My sister went there before, and I came down and played some pick me ups down there at Smith Stadium. And then I was like, yeah, this is a place I want to go, man. Like I didn't play, I ran cross country. So I didn't play soccer competitively in high school. And so fall semester, I was running cross country. And I was like, man, this is a place I want to go. This is, beautiful campus. These people are great and stuff like that. And then like the very next semester, I'm down there and all these people are gone. And they had completely disbanded D1 soccer down there. It was kind of a mad scramble to try to get the season started and scheduled.
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing about the South is that they don't like really lean into the men's soccer. Like UK, South Carolina have it, Louisville has it. The Kentucky schools are good about it. Some don't, but like
Yeah.
Tennessee don't got one, Alabama don't got one. It's
Florida
so weird
doesn't
to
have
me.
one. No,
It's
yeah.
so weird to me because I feel like it's such an easy thing to balance. Like you can find another sport to do it off of, but like it literally has a men's and women's equivalent. Like it's not that hard to balance in my
No.
eyes.
I remember me and my dad were doing this publication, and I remember going back into the back of the page, and somebody had done something about Kentucky winning Conference USA, and I was completely mind blown. I was like, "What? They're playing on the Conference USA, and it comes to soccer?" And they're still playing in like MAC or something like that.
They're
Where,
in the Sun Belt now.
Sun Belt. Okay, yeah. So it's so interesting. It's like SEC puts so much money into uh, their collegiate athletes, and then for men's soccer, it's like afterthought.
Yeah, it's weird because I come from Big Ten country, which is like any sport that's possible they will do. There's
Water
rowing,
polo.
water polo, rowing. There's not really men's water polo, I've noticed, but like that's kind of where it is. That they go in the more obscureness sports. It's kind of where you might not see a balance, but it's like there's men's soccer and there's women's soccer, and it's very different than down here. With that being said, do you have any thoughts? I know Louisville is a rival of Cincinnati, but do you have any thoughts on what's going on down in Louisville, either for the men or women?
Yeah, I casually, again, that's a kind of the same problem, right? So anytime there's a home match, if I wasn't covering FC Cincinnati, I would be a lot more flexible and being able to kind of travel about and stuff like that. But being in the press box, it kind of really limits my availability. And being a dad of two young children, it really hampers your travel ability. But yeah, I love watching Louisville. I try to keep up with them best I can. Unfortunately, I probably only caught 2 games last year, whereas I probably watched most of their games in 2022. So it kind of tailed off there at the end. But they've always been a competitive team. They're the premier franchise in USL, I think, at this point. They clearly have the best stadium, best game day atmosphere in
And
USL.
yeah, I know you said you don't really keep up, but they're one of like 3 teams that got 5 national TV deals. They're
Yep,
going to be on CBS leading
I saw that.
into the final four. Them versus Indy 11 is going to lead into the final four. Other than that, they're on like ESPN or CBS Sports Network, but they could be back on big CBS if they go to the final.
Let me guess,
But they are
is the other markets Sacramento and Memphis?
no, not Memphis. Memphis actually
Okay.
does not have a game.
We're
National
about
one of the 35 national TV games.
we're about the Rowdies or the Battery.
The Rowdies are up there. I believe the Battery have a few. The other one is Detroit.
Detroit City. Wow. That's another
Uh,
FC Cincinnati rival up there.
yeah, which that kind of leads on to some of my points. If we harp this back to the Open Cup, I think one of the things is the geography it's kind of what makes people stale because FC Cincinnati played a lot of Louisville, played a lot of Detroit. You played
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, Columbus. You played a lot of these teams in the Open Cup when there's like, especially when they all started having money. Like we could fly to Minnesota to play a team. We could go to this place type
Exactly.
deal.
Yeah, like in the first rounds, then yeah, I mean like first, second round of I I know it's a bit different this time, right? But in previous tournaments of the U.S. Open Cup, when you're looking at amateur teams that are starting to progress their way up, stuff like that, yeah, you need to be a little bit more regional for that, right? These guys have full-time jobs. They're, they're occupied, right? So, of course, you want to keep that a bit regional. But yeah, once it gets up to USL League One, USL Championship, and MLS, like let's get a little bit more creative about this. Like I couldn't stand every year you're pretty much looking at those, those great envelopes. I know they've gone to the balls, but the envelopes will always live in my memory, pulling names out of envelopes. But to have Pittsburgh, like you pretty much like you said, you could call it every year who your 4 teams were going to be in that group, and that sucks. And I'm super jealous that Lexington's getting to go up to Vermont, like to start off with, because that's what U.S. Open Cup should be about, right? Venturing out, going different places, seeing different soccer.
Yeah, the geography didn't work out great this year because for the first round they have 32 D3 teams and the 32 amateur teams, and they literally went pro can't face pro, amateur can't face amateur, and so that's kind of how it shook out. But I think that's how it could work from this point forward, is just go to the amateur or the lower league side. If I'm U.S. Soccer, go, are you okay to host? Okay, good. Go to the bigger team. Can you travel there? Okay, good. You're going there.
Yeah.
Like, type of deal. I understand they do it at random. It's a coin flip and that type of thing. But, like, if the bigger team can travel to the smaller team and the smaller team can host, they're able to. Now, some can't because of various schedule reasons. Like, a lot of these teams use high school fields.
Yeah.
Then they should go. They should go down, play, whatever. And I think it should be the same with MLS. It should just keep trickling down until you can't anymore, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't have a team that played in a high school stadium, but New York City FC was always a team that had a problem with hosting in the U.S. Open Cup because they were sharing stadiums with the Mets and the Yankees and Yankee Stadium, and it was like, come on, guys.
They still do, New York City FC still plays in the Yankee Stadium.
I know.
They have the most sad championship banner.
It is. Yes. My buddy who lives in Lexington would be jumping out of his chair applauding that. That's his hill. Like every time we talk NYCFC, that is the first go-to, is that banner, that little toilet paper that they hung on the side of Yankee Stadium.
It genuinely looks like something you could, like, if you were a fan, that could buy.
Yeah.
And, like, be able to just put up in your house. It's like that small. It's not huge at all. But the stadium complaints, and you have a pro team. Yes, they're getting their own stadium eventually, but you have a pro team playing on a baseball stadium, and you're complaining about playing on a high school football field that's turf. Or in other baseball stadiums, when you have a pro team that has won your cup.
That is literally there. Yeah. Now the Yankee Stadium is well manicured. I will say that.
It's not.
It's no. I'm not even going to pretend that I can pronounce the name, but we all know that Pennsylvania team, that amateur team. I can't. There's no way I can pronounce it. VE.
Oh, that are facing.
Yeah, that Charlotte Independence is playing. It's like playing at I think it's like a summer camp is what it is. It's like a recreational center.
They're a weird. So there was a conversation on Twitter about this. I wouldn't say they're weird. They are a classic, like, European style team that just never got big because it's very much like this club, this soccer team that's also part of other things.
Yeah.
Like, for those that don't know, in Europe, like, there is a Manchester United cricket team and there is a Manchester United rugby team.
Barcelona basketball team is where Ricky Rubio played.
Yeah, kind of along those lines, where it's like this soccer team exists outside of all this stuff, and it happens to be on like a campground summer camp type thing. So they have a field that they typically play on there. I'm not going to try to pronounce them either. It's like
No.
it's German. It's of German origin.
I
And
took German class, and I'm sorry, Mr. Phelps, there's no way I can pronounce that. You did your best.
Personally, it's worse than like Machen Gladbach. I can't even say them, and I've heard their name 1,000 times. So yeah, that's why they're playing. That's why that's discourse is out there. But they've been around a long time. They've been in the amateur levels a while. So yeah, but that's why that club in Western Pennsylvania is playing on a summer camp field. at a summer camp. I don't think it's a summer camp field, but at a summer camp. But the field's fine.
I think we should make Columbus Crew go out there and play there. I think that should be up to a vote right there. Just put Columbus Crew out there in the summer camp field and see if Cucho survives.
My biggest thing, there are some manicured fields.
There are.
Perfectly fine. Yeah, they might not have any stands around them, but they would be perfectly fine to put some temporary stands.
There was a game like Rochester always had a good before they collapsed. They always had a good field. I remember it was like Motown last year, which is like in New Jersey. It's not in Detroit. Motown of New Jersey. Their field looked pretty pristine. It was shocking to see. It was like, holy cow.
Yeah, I think they play in like a college soccer field. So it's like a dedicated soccer field. Yeah. But it's a good field, and like you also have, back to Messi, you have your best player who refuses to play at some stadiums because he won't play on turf. So it like gets into my thing where like MLS is complaining about these issues where you have a team playing in a baseball stadium and your best player won't play against certain teams because he refuses to touch turf.
So that raises questions. I mean, like, not to go all the way back into that again, but like, do you think part of that is the partnership with Apple TV, the marketability? Like, Apple TV is paying for these rights to MLS games, and if we're getting midweek matches where players are rotating in and out, like think about when FC Cincinnati played Columbus Crew last year. On the road at the Crew, there was a rotated squad for FC Cincinnati because they were playing Inter Miami in the semifinal of the Open Cup. Do you think maybe that had some pool in there where like, hey, we're not even playing our best players at this point? I think Miami was even rotated out before their match against FC Cincinnati.
There's a part of me that thinks possibly yes, just because of watching how the marketing has unfolded for like the CONCACAF Cup right now. Like there's a bunch of people, because this is the only MLS like consistent tournament we have the MLS is competing in that's on linear TV, and numbers ain't doing great. Doesn't help that we have MLS teams that finish decently high in their conferences get smacked by like mid-table Liga MX team, but they're not great right now, personally.
I think though, to be fair though to the MLS and their fan bases though, I think even in USL, I mean we see these packed crowds for Open Cup games, right? But we usually have like 2-3 weeks to prepare to market that. The buzz gets out there, people get in there and fill up the stands. But for like CONCACAF Champions Cup, when you're putting Columbus Crew at 6:00 on a Tuesday night, nobody's going to be there. It's like it's hard to roll over that marketing for 2 weeks ahead of time, but it's also like you're not in control of the schedule, and that's why MLS is kind of poo-poo to any other competition.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I also think there's a factor of that, like, and this is why I think football is king in America, is the like week to week, it's one game a week type deal. Whereas a casual fan is like, yeah, I can go, I'll follow a Saturday, Sunday game every week type deal. And I was like, oh wait, I gotta go there on Tuesday night or a Wednesday night, and I think that's where it kind of starts eating into the casual fan. I also think there's a part of this is just a bad time of year sports wise. No one. This is the one time that everyone actually watches college basketball right
Yep.
now.
Yeah,
So,
we're literally kicking off. It's on the 19th. We're literally kicking off when the
it's like
final
the
first four teams kick off in
Yeah.
Dayton. This is
So
insane.
it's as someone running an SG group, it's the issue I get with watch parties. They're like, "Yeah, we could do that. It might interfere with March Madness." And I'm just like, "Okay," but
just
I get it.
just tell them you were yelling at Calipari a week ago. Just give it up.
But that's really all I got for tonight. You got anything else, Justin, or what
I got
topics, rant you want to fire off?
no rants tonight, man. I gotta hit the hay soon.
I
Tomorrow
get that.
night is 10:30 kickoff, and I got the unfortunate short straw on covering that match. So it's gonna be a long hike, and then I'm gonna be making the quick turnaround, going to my day job, and then going down to Lexington. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
I might be on some energy drinks down there.
There's a gas station nearby. There might be coffee.
Yeah.
Best coffee is sometimes there, but
There's that taco stand at that marathon.
that
I'm not
taco.
sure which
Well, no,
Georgetown
they
exit
have
that
a
is.
food truck.
But yeah,
There's a taco food truck that's always at games that is divine.
Premier. I'm getting it.
They're like you spend like $9 and you get like 3 or 4 tacos, but it's really good. Sorry. Yeah, then that's all I have. Justin, where can people find you, kind of follow you if they kind of want to keep up with you?
Yeah. You can find me personally on X at underscore JE Blair. And then, follow the rest of the Cincinnati Soccer Talk group at Cincy Soccer Talk on Twitter, X, whichever you would call it today. CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com is where we put all of our stuff up. We do 3 podcasts a week covering FC Cincinnati. And we have a lot of great contributors on there, photographers, writers. So our website's pretty up to date. It's almost at this point we're pumping out 2 a day kind of content stream. So check us out. It's a lot of great guys and gals out there.
All right. Well, that was Justin. I'm John. As all our listeners are familiar with, Jimmie, we hope that your little emergency is good and that you and your family are safe and all good. And we will see you next week. See y'all.